And welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger. Happy to see you guys again. We were already here earlier making a makeup video for Wisdom Wednesday. So, again, the date is November 11, 2021. Happy Veterans Day uh, to our American friends, and happy Remembrance Day to our Canadian friends. Definitely all the respect going out to veterans, uh, which almost coincide with our uh, this current series of video. Although the figure we are going to be looking at today is not going to have anything remotely related to veterans. However, the grandmotherly figure we will be looking at coming up next week will be uh, very tightly related to being a veteran and a military and all that stuff. Last week we looked at our first grandma that kicks butt, and we saw a grandma from the Star Wars universe, Maz Kanata, and she was kind of that old and very eccentric and cute and uh, tiny looking, kind of the kind of grandma that you would think is kind of uh, funky, energetic, but for the most part, kind of cute and fun to be with. This week, however, we are going to go full opposite. We're going to the other end of the spectrum and look at a grandma that is creepy and horrifying. It almost seems that for the longest time, at least when I was growing up, there's old and sick old people, and then there's the uh, old and scary old people, creepy, weird old people. There was not a concept of old people that can be anything else. They were either sick and old or they were creepy and old. And I think in our human history, the elderly have always held a certain kind of mystical, uh, maybe demonic kind of power in people's mind, especially in the old days when people had no idea of the concept of dementia and Alzheimer and all the various brain related diseases and physical related diseases that can come with old age. So when a person, which was not very often, because back then the life expectancy was not very long, but when a person was able to live beyond what was expected to be the norm, and the signs of old age started creeping in, such as their uh, body start to change shape, and they start to get hunched, and they move very jerkily, and their joints start to swell up, and their hair and their teeth fall out, and then they start to act a little bit strange sometimes, uh, and have nasty tempers. Yeah, don't knock that. I do know a lot of my elderly friends with nasty tempers, so that I'm not even making that up. When a person goes through that change in the old days, I mean, even if we think like 1,000 years ago, people would have thought, whoa, he or she is demonically possessed. That's why they're so old, and that's why they look so creepy and scary. They don't even look like themselves anymore. People back then had no scientific idea of understanding old age and all that comes with it. This is probably why that throughout our history there's been a lot of fables and folklores and stories and tales, and whenever they need someone creepy and horrifying and with untold amount of power, it's going to be someone uh, old and bent and crooked and uh, just scary looking. The character we're going to be showing today, as you guys see in her from the behind, is kind of one such character that plays on that old stereotype of the old witch, old hag that have a demonic power. Whether she actually does, well, that is really left open to interpretation. Today's lady of the day hails from a Tim Burton movie, The Legend of the Sleepy Hollow. In the movie, there's been a series of gruesome murders committed in the town of Sleepy Hollow, a small, out of in the middle of nowhere town, um, and a constable by the name of Ichabod Crane from New York has been dispatched to go investigate this series of murder. Upon arriving at Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod Crane started to find clues that things were not what they seemed to be. People were hiding secrets, and these murders seemed to be committed by a supernatural force. Eventually, Ichabod Crane followed the clues and went into the western woods, deep into the western wood, and found the witch of the western wood, aka the Crone witch. And it was from that encounter that he finally tracked down the supernatural force behind all the gruesome murders and was able to finally put it to stop. Unfortunately, the Crone Witch became one of the murdered victims, uh, so it is debatable just exactly how witchy she was. Did she actually have any kind of power if she couldn't even defend herself? Uh, Maybe all the magic we saw in the film when Ichabod Crane met her was just hallucination brought on by the herbs and mushrooms she might have been cooking in her cave. Maybe all that scary stuff was just in Ichabod Crane's own imagination. Maybe this was just a regular old woman who was hiding out in the woods and knew a little bit of herbology and knew what kind of weed or marijuana or uh, whatever to throw in the fire to make people hallucinate that she had magical power. I guess we never know because she got murdered and we never saw her do anything really all that impressive. However, uh, the figure made by Todd McFarlane in year 1999 is a relatively creepy and uh, horrifying depiction of an old witch. Back when I was doing the Halloween series, I talked about not having a witch to show you guys because I was saving this grandma for this episode. So I didn't want to show her too early that time. That's why we ended up with Blair Witch from the Blair Witch Project. Since this is a very old action figure, over 20 years old at this point, and McFarlane action figures from back then notoriously known for breaking, so I'm not going to manipulate her joints on camera, and there's really not that much. What you see is what you get. The Witch of the Western Wood stands here in her tattered gown covered in spiderweb. There's a lot of translucent plastic used on this action figure that really brings on a ethereal, ghostly, witchy effect. She's also got a translucent shroud covering her head, which we will remove a little bit later. You can see that her right leg is uncovered, so there's a bit of a leg showing, uh, which is kind of creepy and interesting in that uh, that's actually some pretty shapely leg for an old witch. Uh, yeah, we are not going to dwell too much on that. And her arms are posed like she's holding something or grasping at something in front of her. Like I said, the joints don't really work that well. She has a neck joint. Her arms can move a little bit. The wrist and the shoulder can move a little bit. Her waist can move. And her one ankle
The
can
time is
move.
now 9 p.m.
Thank you. But as I said, because of the age of the figure and because of the, the person who made this figure, we are not even going to attempt to manipulate this joint because I don't feel like having to fix her up later. Uh, just standing there, though, she does present a relatively horrifying uh, image of an old witchy character, which is basically the only reason I got her for. For accessory, she actually came with a whole bunch of stuff, and she had like skull and a couple of pots and pans and a candle, but none of it could be held by her, and there's no way to do anything with them other than having them arranged by her feet. So unfortunately, I have lost those accessories long ago because there was no way to really put them on her or in her hand. Uh, like I said, I mostly got her because I needed an old creepy witch in my collection. Uh, so I didn't really need those accessories in any case. In addition to having relatively useless joints, her almost entire lower body, with the exception of the one ankle, is one solid chunk of plastic, which means this is effectively more of a statue than an action figure. There's just not much you can do with her other than having her standing there menacingly in the background with your other demonic action figures. Uh, Her veil and parts of her dress are softer, rubbery plastic. So it's kind of interesting that they bother to include different materials with such a static action figure. She stands just over 6 inches tall, and with her solid lower body dress construction, it's actually quite a hefty action figure for a figure of that size. Now, technically speaking, she wouldn't really qualify to be a grandma that kicks butt because we never actually saw her kick anyone's butt in the movie. Although her hallucination definitely seemed to kind of take the constable aback for a little while there, and kind of freak him out. Um, but if we want to look at it from a different angle, without the hint and knowledge she gave uh, to Constable Ichabod Crane, that Ichabod Crane would not have found out about the supernatural force behind the murder and then put a stop to it. So we can say in a very indirect way, the witch of the Western Woods actually was responsible for kicking the butt of the headless horseman in the end. Well, yeah, it's all depends on how you look at it, isn't it? Removing her veil from her head, now we see the witch of the Western Woods sports quite a thick mane of matted hair, and looking at her from the back, you can see a little snake, or at least the tail of a little snake, poking out the back of her hair. That is kind of creepy, like she got snakes in her hair, but it gets even worse from here on. Turning her around, we can now see her horrifyingly decaying, rotted visage uh, from the front. Now, keep in mind, this is not actually what she looked like. This is what she appeared to look like in Ichabod Crane's hallucination when he was kind of under her spell. Uh, when she's like normal, standing in front of him, she's still creepy, but nowhere this grotesque. Uh, so this is like the witch in uh, Ichabod Crane's imagination, you can say. Uh, she also has some kind of necklace or something hanging from her neck. I'm not quite sure what that is supposed to be, but the part that draped down around her neck and over her chest, it's all soft, rubbery plastic, and you can actually remove that. I don't know why you would want to, but you can remove that uh, from her if you are careful. But with an action figure this old, it's not something I would recommend because these rubber pieces tend to tear and fall apart very easily after a certain amount of time, especially the quality of toys from the late 90s from McFarlane, I'm sorry, it's not really that great to begin with. But with all that said, now I'm going to show you guys the most creepy and imaginative and creative action features uh, I've seen on this toy and on most of the action figure I've encountered. This witch of the Western Woods has one hell of an action feature, shall we say. Remember this little snake poking out the back of her head? Yeah, right there at the back of her head. If we take this little snake in between our fingers and then push it into her head, you have to do it very carefully because again, very old action figure. But if you work at it, you can push the snake almost two-thirds of the way into her head. But what does that do? Well, prepare yourself because this is a very horrifying sight. By pushing the snake into her head from behind, you will cause three snakes to erupt from her face, one from her mouth and two from her eye sockets. Now, I don't even want to imagine who was going through Todd McFarlane and his design team's head when they designed this action figure or how they put it together. But it is nice and creepy. Okay, I'll hand it to them. It's one of the more creepy action figures, uh, action features I've seen on an action figure for my entire time of collecting action figures. And that little action feature, allowing the snake to come out of her face like this, elevated this action figure from boring almost statue of an old witch to something rather special because it's not something that you see very often to have an action feature that works this well and have this kind of horrific, horrifying effect to it. In the end, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow may have been a rather bland and forgettable horror movie, in some people's opinion, and The Witch of the Western Wood definitely is a little bit of a forgettable character in most people's view. But an action figure of a creepy old witch that can terrify other action figures, and she is even packed with one of the more original and horrifying and creepy action features I've ever seen. Definitely allow this old witch of the Western Wood to be included on the list of grandmas that kick butt. I hope you guys had fun today, and hope that little snaky thing didn't freak too many people out. We'll be back next week to look at yet another grandma that kicks butt. And this one really, really does.